So before today's episode, we'd just like to say goodbye and thank you to our wonderful party member, Savage Mick.
Our dearly departed Savage.
Savage, yeah, he has gone to a better place.
He has gone to a better place.
Called Roscommon.
Yeah.
Must that having some marginal amount of free time back?
He's actually working. He's actually literally living beside where I work at the moment. So I'm going to actually pop out and see him. Or my intention is to pop out and see him. Yeah. And I've got a long lunch break. So Savage has stepped back from doing a load of back end stuff for us, and additionally being the guy who often motivated us, came on with a lot of energy, a lot of waving his hands, a lot of shaking around, charging around the place. It was a very important mobile force for us, and he really helped organize the Discord. He helped keep us going over the pandemic. He basically transitioned us to working on Discord and made recording tons easier. He shook up the intro. He changed the catchphrase from
I'm talking about the gaming, the Irish gaming scene, so you don't have
to the Irish way. And fair play to him. He shook up the place and he attacked a lot of sacred cows. He was a huge influence on the recent years of the show. And we are going to miss him because he's great. He's tons of energy, he's tons of fun, and he's a voice of somebody who is deliberately the more kind of energetic, less deeply schooled gamer. Let's say he's much more likely to go, "Well, what's this about? I don't know. Get it. What are we talking about?" And he got us going in a lot of ways, and he delivered us some great episodes. So we're going to miss you, Savage. Hopefully, he come back someday.
It's just too early for a beer, so I'm going to raise my cup of tea to him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Raise the tea.
He would love to crack open a cold one at this point, but All right, see you around, Savage.
Yeah. You're listening to The Adventuring Party, talking about gaming the Irish way.
Welcome to the party. I'm Dave.
I'm Owen.
I'm Liam.
And I'm Shane. And we are here today to discuss flexibility, we'll call it. Where your character sheet may have a couple of extra sheets stapled on with a list of spells, magic item powers, the techno wizardry that you found in that weird disc-shaped dungeon, and it turns out you're psychic as well, so you got all this list of things and the secondary PowerPoint system, and just at what point have we, turned options into A headache and B a power level headache? We're talking about what I like to call option creep, or the how much is just adding more options and any flexibility, more powers. How much is that a type of power creep all of its own? Because we often talk about certainly as D&D and the like has developed, that the spells themselves are a problem because they've written them in very vague ways that are open to interpretation and people arguing constantly. But there's just the fact that a wizard with enough prep time sort of becomes a bit Batman-y as they go through their career, where they have a utility belt of many options and no real way to moderate them. Have you found in your games that rather than the raw?
It depends on the scaling to a certain extent of abilities, because sometimes abilities hang around forever and are great forever, and sometimes it's like, oh, look, the only one of these that's really good is the high level ones. So put the utility stuff in the rest of your slots, and don't worry about the low level stuff to an extent. Like, I know that in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, what happens is your save DCs for your spells are all the same, but your damage spells fall off if you don't effectively heighten them. So what ends up happening is you keep your top 2 or 3 level slots for damage effects often, and you use the lower level slots on utility stuff. And that's kind of one way they kind of section it off. It still gets to be a very big spell list, but they can section off that way. You also have sometimes where people go, okay, well, actually, I'm just flavoring the spells. So I have effectively my damage spell, which scales, and then I buy in extra utility stuff like Savage Worlds. You're never going to have a ridiculously large spell list in Savage Worlds. You're going to have kind of a half dozen spells, probably.
The size of spell list might not necessarily be the kind of ultimate thing of what might be creep. I mean, I think the current editions of most games have gotten a bit better. I certainly remember a lot of shaky content for 3.5, because I mean 3.5 is really when I got into role playing. I remember the first one I came across that was like, wow, this is just out and out broken. Was the War Mage, which had a trimmed down spell list. Okay, big whoop, same number of spell slots. That's fine. But they got to add their casting stat onto damage. So like a first level, you're going around doing 1d4 plus 5 with a magic missile that never misses. But the counter for that was role-playing penalties, which how many people think that their GM actually enforced role-playing penalties on those players?
Like, how role-playing were those penalties?
You basically fix to a military structure or to a lord.
Yeah, no GM's gonna make their life harder. That was fun.
But the prohibition didn't exist, which meant they just got straight up power for nothing.
Yeah.
The corollary to that as well is where the other one where the counter doesn't happen is where it doesn't fit into the system. So they say, okay, let's bring in psionics, which will, for all intents and purposes, function like magic, but it won't be magic.
Yeah.
So a lot of defenses won't work against us, like. But like you have some. You have some magic classes in different systems which have exceptionally good options. One or two exceptionally good spells that make using anything else pretty much redundant. So I'd question how much actual flexibility would be built into them, like in terms of options. But they certainly have power.
Like, I know that you have, like, the spell list you'd have at the end of a 3.5 campaign for a wizard would be ridiculous, because you can just keep adding spells to the spell book. So they actually have a massive number of possible spells they could cast. Now, in reality, most of those spells aren't going to get used. They're going to have a couple of ones they're going to keep falling back to, but they have the potential there to use kind of all of it. Now, in reality, I don't think they mostly did use all of it. I think they used quite a narrow slice or narrow tranche of what was there. But technically,
you set yourself up at times for a conflict with a player, though, with that, where it's like, how come every wizard we've gacked, they haven't had a spell book on them. Yes. I want to be copying their spells over. I want to go to shops to buy spells, and so I can copy them over from the scrolls or whatever. There can be a certain amount of gatekeeping there, which can cause conflict with the player. Yeah,
and it's interesting to see like the development of the wizard in we'll call it the post-sorcerer world. What was once just assumed as part of the wizard, and all wizards are horrible mercenary people who will, shank a baby for their spellbook. Thing has sort of gone from just an accepted part of being a magic user to a specific perk of the wizard class. But the popularity of stuff like sorcerer or warlock just keeps going up and up, because a lot of people just do not want to are not particularly the idea of going scavenger hunting for extra spells only appeals to some people. Some people, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely. I mean, the scavenger hunt is a very particular slice of gameplay that I think is deeply appreciated by a small number of people and mostly disliked by everybody else. I mean, a lot of people will not be like, oh, I have to roll for what spells I get. Where the rolling for what spells you get was an important kind of bit of itemization of the game. Whereas, like, no, you don't necessarily have magic missile. You're gonna have to get magic missile. You don't necessarily have strength. And one of the changes that happened as the game matured was the assumption became, no, you can just pick whatever spells you like. And even today, even in the most kind of restrictive campaign, the wizard still gets to pick 2 spells a level in almost every iteration of the D20 wizard.
I guess what you've seen with some things, I mean, certainly Pathfinder 2 has it. And I guess it's more for organized play, but you could use it in your own game if you're not doing organized play, is tagging stuff with common, uncommon, regional, that kind of thing. You could certainly adapt that and be like, oh, okay, yeah, you want to take Magic Missile, that's fine. I mean, every other wizard knows Magic Missile. Probably most wizards know Magic Missile. But, if you want to know, I don't know, Unseen Servant or something, maybe that's a bit of a more niche one. And certainly any of the ice stuff based out of the ice country might be something that you would have to be from that region or interact closely with that region or someone from that region, or maybe even go to that region to get that spell.
Yeah, but with something like Pathfinder or D&D, that sort of changes by the fact that you have a very good chance that you'll get huge amounts of extra content. Like whoever remembers the 3.5 times when every supplement would come with 10 pages of spells and 5 pages of feats and a bunch of magic items, and then you'd get most people would just ignore it because they didn't buy every supplement, but you get the buy every supplement tables, and then all of a sudden everyone want to respec their characters to get all these new. Oh, these are ice themed spells. Oh, ice themed feats. Oh, well, now my character's been a snowman all along.
Yeah, the problem with so many splat books supplements, play testing every combination simply wasn't going to happen, even if a company wanted to. And Power Gamers had an absolute field day with the likes of 3.5.
Yeah, I visit the place full of fiery gin, so I took a feat that lets me add D6 or an extra dice onto fire spells. And then you look at it and go, oh, well, there's an amount of magic feat that lets me change out all elemental damage to fire, which, I mean, nearly everything's got fire resistance. Maybe that's the least harmful example, but, were you to be able to change that to, say, acid or cold or something, that might be, or sonic, or hell, even force, then that could cause real problems.
My favorite one of these was the set of feats you could take to turn the locate city spell into a small nuclear explosion. Actually, a very large nuclear explosion. I don't remember. It's like 1 mile per caster level or something. Because you just
and you basically put a damage on it.
Yeah, you use turn it into an ice spell. Take a feat so that your ice spells do an extra dice of damage, and then you do a thing where you do extra damage based on the radius of the spell. And Locate City was huge radius for first level spells, so you just explode and push everything in like 20 miles to at Mach 5, and the damage to itself.
That was the kind of thing that the GM unfortunately had to step in and go, hang on, we're not doing this. Technically you were correct. We're not doing this.
Not in fact the best ever.
It's up there with the peasant railgun, all right.
Yeah.
I see another aspect of this though, beyond the option creep and everything else, is simply the management thing. It's how much overhead the class has. And you can be like, hang on, I got a spell for this. Give me a second.
Yeah, that's a line I think most of us had said some stage.
Yeah, and that's, I think, actually the most destructive aspect of it, going, I got a spell for this. Give me a second.
It can eat time.
Yeah, absolutely. Gobbles time with great speed, where you're like, okay, hold on. I have a spell for this. Give me a minute. And what do you say? Tell the fire, no minutes for you, or do you let him go, oh, no, okay, let him have his think. I do go, just a second. But they've got a million things they could be doing, and they've got to look through. Oh, let me read the style description of that one. No, that doesn't do it. It's not that one, And you could very legitimately, as GM, go, no, hang on, that's too long. Your character is thinking about it. Cast something else right now, or don't cast anything.
I guess for me, the honest player and the well-informed and well-intentioned player isn't as much a problem. But if you start having this expansive thing and you have somebody, if somebody wants to be a munchkin, they have the munchkin, and that's a problem in itself. We discussed that plenty. What I've encountered as a problem is where you have all these expansive options and you have people who misremember or perhaps selectively read their abilities and perhaps don't read the penalties associated with it.
Yeah.
Like, the most notorious for me when I was playing Pathfinder was Pathfinder First Ed was the 1 round casting time spells, which invariably were remembered as a standard action.
Yeah.
I cast summon. Okay. Well, hang on a second. What is all that? I get a whole round to hit you. He gets a whole round to hit him.
And they say it. And per the rules of organised play, it was you needed to have the book with you. Did anyone have the book with them? No, of course not. And that was a problem. But, you're the problem for pointing it out.
Yes.
Because it's a 3-hour slot and you're under time pressure and, can we just do this, GM, please? I mean, that's sort of a wider argument, a wider issue is the fact that the alternative for a lot of people, rather than pouring through their spell lists, is they'll start arguing that one of their other powers, or in a situation where you don't have a list of powers, where all of a sudden your one power that you get has many utility uses if you think about it hard enough. And I can't think of anything that people like less than wasting time someone checking their spell book than wasting time watching someone argue with the GM for a period.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Here's one of the things that kind of clarified it for me. I played a lot of Wolfrup 3rd Edition. And Wolfrup 3rd Edition, if those of you who know, all of your abilities were on cards. And I played a fairly long campaign of it. And by the end of it, some of my players had 20 cards in their suite of abilities. And there was no, you only use 3 at a time, or you can basically they had a hand of 20 cards that they had to flick through when they wanted to do stuff. And this is because it was as always, it's an RPG, it's kind of a first draft, no one ever does late game play. But what it should have had was an unlocking thing where actually I only have like 8 abilities at a time max. And then stuff has to become inactive or stuff gets upgraded. Because some of those abilities were like, this is an attack. This is a better version of this attack. This is another better, an even superior version of that same attack. And because the cards had individual cooldowns, the players would play the cards down in front of them, and they'd be taking out a cooldown token every turn. So you did actually want multiple iterations of your special attack. It's not the same card, but an upgraded version of it. And what ended up happening was I had one of my players was playing a Great Sword of Hoth, and he had all these defensive cards to put down. So you'd be playing them once a turn, or when there was a reaction, I'll play a block, and I put this card and I put 3 cooldown tokens on it. Now I add a black to my I add a black whenever you attack me, and that's sort of like the special black bad dice and there's white good dice. And there's there's purple difficulty dice and green basic dice and yellow advanced dice and red advanced bad dice, and you put different ones in your opponent's pool, that kind of stuff. But it meant that there was a huge information management problem, even with each one of those having effectively a small rules set on it that you could just immediately refer to. They still had too many cards. I had another player playing a Bright Wizard and had exactly the same problems. Because he had 20 spells. And you have to look through his spells when you want to do something. So that's, I think, the option creep, even with good support documentation, then becomes bad. That someone should look from a playability point of view going,
So did the Wolfram 3rd Ed wizard need to have like a set of the card. My brain is drawing a blank, but the binder with all of the cards in a binder.
Yeah, probably. Well, at which point he's got a grimoire.
Yeah,
but that was they should have. That's a playability thing they should have spotted and go, hang on, let's change this up so you don't have a ridiculous sprawl of spell cards. You have you have 10 ability slots or whatever. You can have that many, and then after that, stuff starts going inactive. You basically put it away for a bit, and maybe you give it the ability to rejigger it. Okay, so you can pull stuff out of your inactive one, but at the start of the day, you figure out what you're using. That's what you're using for the day. Spell preparation, as it were, but for other abilities.
I don't want to beat an old horse, but you taking that logic, it sounds like fourth ed D&D was the smartest D&D one, and that's an interesting drum to bang on these days.
My issues with fourth ed D&D are it took too bloody long to play, right? The hit point values were way too high, and number two, WotC were jerks about how they did it. Those are my objections to fourth ed D&D.
Yeah, no, I again was being a bit facetious, but
everything else about it was good, basically. But those are my two objections to it.
And fortunately, because of X and Y, we did not learn the correct lessons from it.
No, we never do. We always learn the wrong lessons.
Yeah, but that was one of the things, was like it had this sort of regimented, but also like designed. Like we could argue whether it was well designed or badly designed, but it was designed to have this effect of you level up from using magic missile all the time, or to having powers of the appropriate power level. You were always going to be using the correct power level of powers when you were fighting, and that meant the experience was not going to go suddenly off the rails because you decided to go hunting through your spell book for, I think there's a level 2 spell that might be this specific weakness of this one monster in this one situation.
I have bullets to burning gold. That will turn this will deal with this loup-garou.
No, just think of an example of a magic system that's incredibly flexible, loads of options, but has considerable downsides, which are in universe and somewhat balance it. Mage the Ascension, because with your spell, there aren't technically spells, although there's suggested ones. That the factions use, but whatever spheres you have, you can create some effects, and well, at least until Paradox eats you.
You see, I mean, the thing about that was that the rotes were there, and rotes were good because they made it either easier or cheaper to do. Rotes were kind of spells, but the thing was, you wouldn't have that many different spheres. You'd have probably 3 or 4 for a mid-experienced character, because you'd be like, oh, I want to get sphere 4 of forces, or I want to get sphere 4 of matter, and I need prime 2 if I'm making anything, and then I would need other stuff. And the thing about mage though was everything was going to be a negotiation with the GM. It didn't exist. It would never exist as a totally independent discussion, because that wasn't how the game worked. It's like which side of the mage civil war was your GM on? And did he believe that every spell was automatically vulgar and paradoxical because the player informed the collective unconscious that they did it, even if they successfully concealed it from somebody else? Because there were GMs that believed that. There was no such thing as coincidental magic. All magic was vulgar. So I mean, there was no standard mage table because of that. There was one of a couple of different opinions about how Paradox worked. So you'd never have the same kind of consensus you'd get in D&D, because there was a lot more, hey, you have these kind of influences, and you could read the books and you get one idea of how it worked, and then if you read some of the other books, it would give you a different idea how it worked.
Yeah.
There was no overall vision, because that wasn't how 90s White Wolf were about?
Like, some people would be like, okay, what I want to do is I want a correspondence onto the scene. And how I'm going to correspondence onto the scene, teleport in, is I'm going to show up in a taxi. I'm just going to step out of the taxi. And that's me teleporting in. And some GMs were effects focused. And they would just go, yeah, grand, that's correspondence 4. All right? They might say... They might require something else, right? Another GM would go, okay, well, to do this, you need matter 5 to create a taxi. You need prime 2 to fuel that creation. You need life 4 because you're creating a person driving the taxi. You need mind 3 to animate the person in the taxi. You need forces 4 to control the major forces involved, or forces 5 to, or forces 3 to create the forces to push the taxi onto the scene. You need correspondence to appear. All of that in the same ritual.
Yeah, that seems a little much.
Because you're creating that. And that would be a tension point, an argument in Mage, about which needed to happen.
And I guess that's one of the things we're going to gravitate for is like, are you a pro argument table or an anti argument table? Because that's going to be with things like you can make everything way more flexible and get a whole much mileage out of a small set of character options if you're willing to have 30-minute arguments about how each thing works multiple times a night.
I mean, I think you'd hope that modern RPGs wouldn't have a situation where sections of the ability are just, look, your GM will decide. And I turn around and look straight at the camera. Most good RPGs make an attempt to explain the use cases and how their abilities work. Most of them do. If anyone didn't, they would be desperately irresponsible. And lazy. And feckless. And if they were then the leading RPG on the planet, it'd be a disaster because we never learn anything.
But I have like these 37-year-old GMs clamoring at me all the time saying that they want everything to be open to interpretation because then they can flex their GMing muscles and show their 37 years of experience. I have they're part of my audience too, right? They're certainly loud enough. There must be millions of them.
I'm a slightly older GM, and let me tell you, I far prefer everything to be nice. And you see, our table's tactic will be the GM's got final call, but a GM will listen to a quick, hey, this is how it works. Because the GM may not know exactly how every stupid player ability works. And the GM can always go back later and read it. But it's like, wait, how does that work? This is how it works. And the GM should be able to go read that, go, oh, you're right, grand, that's fine. Relatively quickly. Or the GM can go, well, we'll run with that today, but I'm going to go over and look at that ability. And if that is how it works, I'm going to change that. And that, like, you want to keep the game rolling, you know? You don't particularly want to call a full stop unless you have to call a full stop. You know? If someone goes, okay, I'm going to nuke this city with this detect locate city spell, I'll be like, hang on a second here. Let me take a look at this before I open this Pandora's box of you having access to nukes. I need to have a look here. Yeah, okay, that's not how it works. You know, we're not doing that. You're right. This is technically how you can do it, but we're not doing that. Or okay, you are doing that. You've created the first nuclear weapon, and now other wizards are going to start researching the same.
Well, that'll end well.
Yeah, basically. So, but then that's what your campaign becomes about. So you've got to. You may need to give your GM a chance to think about that.
So, in the end up, are we saying we're anti-flex? Are we anti-big list of options? Are we saying that our game experiences should be more focused and characters should be specialized on their role? Or are we willing to entertain the fantasy of the game where anyone can do anything if they pick the right options? Is that fantasy important?
personally, I think games that still, that allow a massive amount of flexibility in their casting, should also put a bit more emphasis on players being very familiar with their spell lists and not, I suppose, not dragging the game to a halt for half an hour each round. To quote a slightly extreme case. Basically, if you want, like, from a purely practical point of view, you need to have people who can physically do the thing they want to do without dragging the game to a halt.
For me, I think as a GM, you should have kind of a core assumption, which could be, okay, well, the core book is in everything in the core book. People can take, cool, no problem. And then if there's big books, you can vet those individually as they come out and be like, yeah, that's okay. As a player, I don't think it is fair for you to assume that anything outside of the core book is there. And certainly ask your GM, can I use this? But don't assume that you can't, because there's a lot of content in there. I don't think it's fair if you do expect your GM to be familiar with all of it. And they, cut them some slack and say, hey, look, I want to use this. Is this okay? And be prepared for no to the answer, because you need to maintain some kind of control and might have interactions that could derail your whole game.
The GM should be allowed to say no.
Oh, 100%.
Always.
They shouldn't always say no. I shouldn't say no for no good reason, but certainly it should be like,
I'm allowed to say no is an important bit of GMing. And a lot of the more, let's say, the focus on...
You probably say it's an important bit of everything.
Yeah. But a lot of the improv stuff is more like, oh, you should be really saying yes or roll the dice. And I'm like, hang on. The GM has to say no about some things. And putting one person is kind of responsible for the organization and running of the game, that person should get a little more say about what's going on in it. Just cause.
I don't think we're saying that it needs to be a dictatorship.
No, not at all. But just have the power and the comfort to say, nah, we're not doing that. Good idea. Nah, not doing it. And that's important to have that as an option.
Man, I have a variety of options of thoughts. I have the thing like I still kind of going on like is the perceived imbalance between fighters and wizards partly because fighters don't get these plethora options that a spellbook toting wizard does, as opposed to fireball being broken, although it's entirely possible both are true, and certainly in the current edition, see previous episodes. And the episode that's coming, don't worry, any day now, we're going to do that Fixing Fighters episode.
Do more than the classic, 3 combats and then give them a short rest. Push that to six combats without a short rest and tell me that Wizards and Fighters are in balance.
Yes, I'll just I'll put my teleporting, flying pack superheroes through the ringer any day now. But yes, I think the fact that we're drifting into so many elements of this shows that how flexible your RPG characters are is a big part of how a game goes, and it is something that needs to be carefully managed. And a lot of games being, let's say, player facing, are more than happy to just hand out option after option for players and less options for a GM to manage them, other than be mean to them. It'll work totally. And oddly how that doesn't work out so well. But I think, we seem to have gone down a little bit on the anti-flexibility side, just because of the knock-on effects. So, ban all options. Everyone's a fighter. Everyone is a half-orc fighter now.
I don't think I'd say ban all options. Bet all options.
Yeah.
Vet is a great word.
Yeah, you need to keep it you need to ultimately keep it manageable, and not keeping it manageable induce a lot more load on the players, load on the GM, load on everybody. And that's, we're all about the GM being given a break occasionally. And that's part of it. The poor old GM needs a break. The poor old GM always needs a break.
Yeah, seems so. If you'd like to argue at length that your posting skill lets you counter all of our arguments with silly memes, you can hit us up in our Discord and destroy our algorithms. Or hit us up on, well, actually, don't have that much other social media these days. Someone decided options were a bad thing and decided to take them off the internet. But otherwise, YouTube comments, Discord, or email us at party@adventureparty.com if you'd like to explore your options for how to interact with our wonderful podcast. But for now, this party's over. Thanks for listening to the Adventure Party. You can find show notes and links to things we've mentioned at www.theadventuringparty.net and on our Facebook page. You can leave comments there or record a message at www.speakpipe.com/theadventuringparty. We can also be contacted by email at party@theadventuringparty.net. If you'd like to be in touch with the party all the time, come join our Discord server. Links in the show notes. The Adventuring Party is released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license.